We're talking week 12 college football favorites. Jake, last week I was 3-5. You were 5-3. It brought my total to 45-44. You're at 47-35. So you're plus 12 units on the year. I am plus 1 unit, which, hey, I'm in the green.
The glory of betting on BroThrow. If you were betting on any other site or through any other bookie, you would be in the red. But because there was plus 100 odds on every single bet, you are in the green as we move forward to a nice week 12. As we start getting into these big matchups and rivalry games. It's the peak time for college football. I'm super hyped.
It's peak time. I'm going to the Georgia-Tennessee game this week. I'm super excited for that. My first time in Tennessee. But now we're getting to the rivalry games, like you said, and the games that are really meaningful because teams who win championships win in late November. Championship team, Michigan, has to give 19 points on the road at Maryland. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, it's a lot of points to give on the road, especially with a massive look-ahead spot where Michigan plays Ohio State next week. But Maryland is really playing poor football as of late. Yes, they won last week against Nebraska, but Nebraska completely gave the game away and should have easily won that game. And that snapped a 4-game losing streak for Maryland. So honestly, in my mind, they're on a 5-game losing streak right now. Michigan beat Penn State last week in a pretty impressive performance. They didn't pass the ball one single time in the second half. It looked like me playing a game of NCAA football 2014, just running completely down their throats. Penn State, it was more of a tactical performance, I think, for Michigan, because Penn State's offense was doing absolutely nothing, and they knew just limit turnovers, limit mistakes, and even if we just punt the ball and pin Drew Aller deep, that's all we need to do to win, and that's what it took. Against Maryland, I think that they're going to be more free on offense. They're going to be more willing to throw the ball and go for big plays because they know that Talia Tagovailoa has potential to put up points. But I don't think Maryland's playing well enough. They've given up 4.5 yards a carry back-to-back games. Michigan's got a much better rush offense than those teams they face, so I think that Michigan's too locked in right now. I think they're upset about how this whole situation's panned out, and I'm going to lay the 19.
Yeah, go back to what you said about Maryland beating Nebraska last week. It wasn't a real win because Nebraska could have won that game. They gave the ball away 5 times. Maryland had to win it on a field goal at the very end after Nebraska gave it away again in the end zone. So although technically, yeah, they got a win on the scorecard, that was not a winning team. It was not a winning performance. They looked terrible the entire way through. You know, last week my gut said, ride Michigan. I called you on Sunday. I said, we're riding Michigan this week. You're like, really? Next day, I watched some TikTok. I watched some YouTube. All these analysts tell me that Penn State's going to win outright at home, and I need to ride Penn State. So I made the mistake, and I rode them. And I thought, you know, there's a chance that Penn State's going to play hard and Michigan's going to regress. But no, Michigan looks as dominant as ever this week. I think they can win by 28 plus. You watched how Maryland got beat up by Penn State just a couple weeks back, and this is going to be a similar situation for them. So I'm following you. I'm riding Michigan minus 19. Next is Washington at Oregon State. I know that you didn't put this one on your card, even though you always add Washington to your card. Something changed once you saw Oregon State was favored, and the problem I think for you is you love betting Oregon State as much as you love betting Washington.
It's two teams I absolutely love betting. It's tough. This is like asking to pick a favorite child this week in this game.
I was off of them last week, but after they failed to cover in back-to-back weeks, they bounced back strong and they had a huge win against Stanford. Now you've got Washington coming in off back-to-back huge games against USC and Utah. Now going undefeated is really hard to do, especially when you got to play 3 top 20 teams back-to-back-to-back. But then you add in the fact that this is in Corvallis. It's at night. Oregon State still has the potential to make the Pac-12 championship game if they win out and if Arizona loses to either Utah or Arizona State next week, which are 2 things that could happen. Now, Oregon State's defense is way better than Washington's, and the offense has a strong running game that averages almost 200 yards a game. And you've got a quarterback who's played in big-time games before. So I think they're ready to pull off a signature win. And Jonathan Smith's, what I'm going to say, is his final season before he gets paid big from an SEC or a Big Ten school.
Yeah, that's actually, a complete certainty that Jonathan Smith is going to be done in Oregon State. We've been alluding to that the entire season, even preseason. We kind of were talking about it, but this is such a tough game for me to pick because I love both teams. What I look at, though, is this over-under total of 63.5, because as you said, Oregon State has a really, really strong defense. So with this over-under set at 63.5, the books are essentially saying this is going to be, a 33-30 type game. Well, I think if it's a high-scoring game like that, that favors Washington. If it gets to a situation where it's whoever has the ball in their hands last wins, I trust Penix a lot more than I trust DJU. This is not a scenario where it was like with Washington versus Oregon, where if Oregon had the ball last, you knew that Bo Nix was going to drive down and get a touchdown. I still think that Washington has a chance to stop Oregon State in that dramatic last drive. I love the over in this game because I'm confident in Washington's ability to put up points. Their overs hit basically every week. Even last game against Utah, where they dropped it to 49.5, the most absurd number I've seen from Washington this season. It hit in the first half. Tough game to pick. I lean toward Washington, but I'm probably just going to take the over and watch and enjoy this game.
Yeah, I had the over last week too at 49. Last minute, I bailed out on it. It's so stupid. It hit in the first half. I just didn't know why it was so low. I thought maybe the books knew something I didn't, but they didn't. They just didn't realize that Washington has that offense that is that potent that you and I both talk about every week. Going back to what you said about BroThrow and the plus 100 odds, right now you can go on the site, sign up for free if you click the link in the description box below. You get plus 100 on all totals and spreads. Right now, Washington +2, plus 100 odds, meaning if you bet 50, you'll win 50. Same thing goes for the total. And the money line odds at plus 130 or better than you'll find on any sportsbook or any of the apps that you've seen advertised anywhere else. So check out BroThrow if you haven't yet, because that's where Jake and I place all of our action. Moving on, we've got Illinois at Iowa. Iowa is -3.
Another week, another Iowa picking these videos for me. I mean, they're kind of like Oregon State and Washington. I just love taking them because they come through and deliver. Iowa, ever since they lost Cade McNamara, has played the style of football that we just absolutely love to see. The run, punt style. And it has been working very, very well. They shouldn't have lost that game on that blown fair catch call. So they really should be undefeated since that injury. And I see no reason to think why Illinois could beat them. Illinois' defense gave up so many yards and big plays to Indiana last week that Iowa, I actually think, will be able to score a couple points on them. I still like the under here because Iowa's defense is playing so well, and I don't think they're going to be able to put up 30 points by themselves. But I think that this is going to be a very comfortable game for Iowa. Not too worried at all about in the spot. They're at home. They're playing really, really well. Their defense is absolutely locked in. I don't think Illinois is scoring a touchdown in this game, so I'm taking Iowa for sure, and I like the under too.
Big shutout vibes. Well, Iowa's just really tough to bet on in late November because it seems like they always get better down the stretch, and typically they make the Big Ten championship game or they make a push for it. And this year is going to be no different. Next is UCF at Texas Tech. This is a crazy spot because you've got two teams who are coming off top 25 upsets, and they're both a win away from bowl eligibility. Texas Tech obviously has the home field advantage, but even though they started slow, their losses are all pretty respectable, and they've gotten better as the year's gone on. But then you look at UCF, who's got 2 wins in the last couple of weeks, but before that, they lost 5 in a row, and they haven't shown enough consistency to make me believe they can win on the road, especially when Texas Tech gets the home field advantage, and this one will go into the night. Their only 2 road wins this year were Boise and Cincinnati, both by 2 points. And those teams were coming off losses and they're having down years. So UCF is a facade to me because they beat Oklahoma State last week. So I'm going right back to Texas Tech, just like I did last week against Kansas. And I think they'll pull through.
UCF is one of the toughest teams in the country to figure out. They look super competitive against Oklahoma. Then they get blown out by West Virginia. They look super amazing, as you said, last week against Oklahoma State. But I kind of agree with you. I think it's kind of like a 1-week wonder type thing. Oklahoma State coming off a big win against Oklahoma. Maybe they just weren't focused. I'm going to lean with you on Texas Tech here too, just because they're at home. They're fighting for that bowl game, and this is kind of a great opportunity for them to get it done. So I would lean Tech here too.
You've got Clemson at home against UNC. This line has now moved to 7. What are you thinking?
This is the classic spot that I take on the show every time that I see it. This is only, I believe, the 4th time this entire season that we've had a road ranked team be underdogs to an unranked home team. Clemson is that unranked home team. We're 2-1 of those spots, hitting a nice 66%. I think we improved to 75% this week. Dabo is playing actually pretty well in the last couple of weeks. Even though Clemson struggled early on in the season, they kind of picked it up after that loss against NC State. They beat Notre Dame and they beat down Georgia Tech last week. Playing really good football. North Carolina, on the other hand, their defense is really not that strong at all this season. Duke, who had a 3rd-string quarterback in there, was able to put up 45 points and take them to double overtime. An incredibly, great chance for them to actually win that game outright. They gave up 46 points to Georgia Tech in a loss. They gave up 31 points to Virginia in a loss. Yeah, they beat Campbell between them, but that's their 3 most recent games against big-time opponents. Clemson's just playing too well. Their offense is too strong, and UNC is not going to be able, I think, to keep up because Clemson's defense is actually capable of getting stops. So I'm riding Clemson here. I'm riding Dabo. I think they're going to get the job done at home.
Well, I think this line just tells you how overrated UNC really is. They have a weak D, and on the flip side, Clemson held Notre Dame to 0 passing TDs and only 150 passing yards. So we know they can beat good quarterback play. Clemson's offense actually has been getting better, and even though they aren't great, they're going to be able to score pretty easy on a defense that gives up, I think, 400 yards a game. So I will follow you on this play. It's another what we'll call Freud special, and I like Clemson to cover the 7. Even if it moves to 7.5, I'll probably still be on it. Last is Syracuse at Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech coming off a loss, like you said, to Clemson last week. Syracuse coming off a win over Pitt, who is terrible, and they shouldn't have lost that game last week, but they somehow managed to. Now, I'm going to ride with a competent QB this week in Haynes King, who's got wins over UNC and Miami. Plus, obviously, he has home field advantage at night. So I'm not betting on Georgia Tech in this spot. I'm betting against Syracuse. And the reality is their wins are just much stronger. And the losses to Ole Miss, Louisville, and Clemson are all considered pretty good since they were able to score at least 21 in all 3 of those games. When you look at Syracuse, all of their losses are bad losses. They haven't looked impressive all year. I got to ride Georgia Tech just because principle go against Cuse.
Yeah, Cuse started off 4-0, but then went on a 5-game losing streak before riding the ship last week against Pitt. I think the big key here is that Georgia Tech is 5-5. And after this game, they play Georgia. So they know they're not winning that game. So if they want to make a bowl game, this is it. This is the chance. This is their week. All the marbles, they got to break out all their big plays, all their trick plays, whatever they got stored in the tank. This is the game to break it out.
Yeah, I agree. That's such a good point. These bowl game spots are so important because if they don't get to it this week, they're not going at all. So they're going to do whatever it takes to get past Cuse, and it's not going to take much. I can promise you that. But Jake, we're going to get on to our underdogs video. Thanks for the picks. Hopefully I can turn it around, and hopefully you stay just as hot as you've been these last couple weeks.
Absolutely. And I'll see you in the next one.